Saturdays were always and forever will be my favorite days of the week. After a hard week at school/work, there is nothing more refreshing than waking up on Saturday, booting up your favorite video game, and letting the day just whisk away. This was the case for me ever since the early 2000s, especially when my mom bought me Sonic Heroes. I would always look forward to the weekends because that's when my cousin would visit me and we would go through the game story mode together and just enjoy everything. Until one day he just stopped coming over. I was heartbroken that our little playthrough together came through an end, but I was determined to finish the game. It took me upwards of a year to fully complete Sonic Heroes, and I actually think it's a great Sonic game, a very, very solid Sonic game at that, but I have this funky relationship with the game. See, Sonic Heroes takes concepts from classic Sonic and the adventure games and kind of blends them together. The level design and feel of the levels are very classic Sonic-like. Characters, the world, the stages, everything is bright and colorful, unlike the semi-realistic version in the adventure games. Story goes back to being as simple as the classic titles, with kind of an adventure twist with how there's multiple stories and they all intertwine with one another, which I think is one of the strong suits of Sonic Heroes, blending both classic and modern, air quotes on modern, elements to kind of create this Sonic game, which is what I believe the developers had intended. They wanted Sonic Heroes to be a game that attracts both old and new fans, and I think this is great because, hey, you don't have to play Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 to pick up this game, nor do you have to play the classic titles. You can just pick up Sonic Heroes as a brand new starting point and be okay, or you could be a old school diehard Sonic fan and pick this game up and get blown away with how it reminds you so much of the classic games and is a slight evolution of the adventure games. So far, everything seems like a win-win. However, when you actually play Sonic Heroes, that's when the cracks start to show. See, for as much as a solid game Sonic Heroes is, it's only good for one playthrough. And in this case, one playthrough is only playing as one team. But to fully experience the game, when you fully complete each and every character's story, that's when the cracks start to show. Sonic Heroes becomes a little bit buggy, tiring, and just a really, really bad case of deja vu. So, my dear viewer, let me explain, starting with the gameplay. Unlike the adventure games before it, Sonic Heroes goes for a different gameplay loop. Instead of three distinct gameplay styles, speed, treasure hunting, and mech shooting, we have the brand new team-based gameplay, where the characters are all bundled together in teams of 3 with 4 teams total, for a total of 12 playable characters. Each character is put into one of 3 categories: speed, power, and flying. Speed characters are fast and can platform very quickly, as well as take out enemies very quickly with their homing attacks. Power characters are all about laying the smack down on the enemies and creating property damage. And flying characters are all about swatting down the flying foes and having one of the most funky poses in history. The fact that characters have their own type means that there will be situations where their skills will shine. For instance, there will be multiple areas where there's just a big gap, so you'll obviously need to use a flying character. Or maybe there'll be some reinforced enemies with some super steel that will require you to use a power character in order to do damage. This is well and all, but in order to make the differences between each character and each, type more apparent, Sonic Team kind of messed with their stats a little bit. Speed characters were made extra speedy and zoomy to make them feel faster than the regular characters, leading to many situations where you're just fucking zooming off the map or just end up grinding your face all over the place or just having to jump around to just kind of course correct yourself. Flying characters are made extra sluggish because they are forced to take this weird formation that I really believe is just dumb, because why can't they be just walking around normally and then take the formation when they have to fly? But because they have to take this silly formation at all times, they are very slow. And power characters are actually the more neutral one movement wise, with my only gripe being is that if you are playing as Big or Vector, their kind of gameplay is very stop and start, because whenever they do their attack, they just stand in place and shoot out their partners. But if you're playing as Knuckles and Omega, then they have this nasty little slide that kind of feels like somebody put grease all over the floor. And this little slide has led to more of my fair share of heart attacks and death. You know that photo of like the little kid that's like,
I don't have it on.
Drawing art, and then it's them like drawing art and it's them crying? That's me. Like, thinking about Sonic Heroes, I'm happy. Playing Sonic Heroes, I'm fucking crying, bro. No, please. Speaking of death, the stage list in this game is very similar to the classic titles, in which every team goes through the same pool of stages. Which I imagine was great for the development team because they did not have to develop different stages for different gameplay styles. And great for the people who were not big of any gameplay style that wasn't the speed action stages in the adventure games. Like the classic games, the levels start off simple and easy to blast through, with wide lanes and safe places for you to get accustomed to the team style system that they have for this game, but eventually become much more complex with a lot of do or die situations and long as hell stages that sometimes keep going and going and going. See, stages begin at the 4 to 5 minute at best range, but then the later stages start taking upwards to 7+ minutes, and that's with me knowing the game after all these years. Imagine a younger Sonic fan or a younger Chris experience this for the first time, and it's easy to imagine these stages hitting possibly the 8 to 10 minute mark. Couple that with the fact that there are 14 stages in this game, and then the time starts adding up. And then you factor what I mentioned earlier with the fact that this game is very similar to the classic stages in which every team goes through the same pool of stages. You slowly do the math and you realize that there are 56 stages that you have to go through in order to fully complete Sonic Heroes. You see this number right here? This is the main reason why Sonic Heroes is one of those games that I just avoid playing, because it's a marathon in order to just beat the game. And I have no problem sinking in 20+ hours games because hell, that's even just how modern games are. But the problem with Sonic Heroes is that it's 20+ hours going through the same stage over and over and over again with little to no changes. I have no problem with the classic titles doing that. But the problem is that when it comes to a 3D Sonic game, I kind of wanted to evolve from the classic style of the games. Give every team, every story a different set of stages. Maybe have 1 or 2 stages that cross paths with each other person's story. I don't know. But please don't make me go through 14 stages 4 times just so I can complete the full story of the game. Small little rants aside, when you are just doing 1 or 2 full team playthroughs, the Burnout doesn't hit that hard, and the stages are actually fun and enjoyable. Some of my favorite stages being Ocean Palace because of its ocean aesthetic, Frog Forest because the frogs are fucking adorable, and Egg Fleet because holy shit, this is a giant ass stage with multiple branching paths that are just begging to be explored that require very pristine platforming and decision making. It is great, all under this bright, beautiful blue sky. If you haven't noticed at this point just yet, Sonic Heroes does something interesting that I haven't seen in a Sonic game since. Underneath each character's portrait, there are these 3 little balls that indicate the character's level. With every level a character gets, the stronger they become. At level 3, speed characters can one-shot basic bots with their homing attacks and traverse through parts of the levels without needing to stop and go, like with these poles. They can just homing attack onto them and just go up them. Flight characters become menaces to the Eggman Empire with their long-range attacks, letting them both take out grounded enemies and flying enemies in just one shot, and power characters become walking nuclear bombs. Now, while the stages are beatable with the characters at level 1, leveling up really does make going through the stages a lot easier, and is even the key to helping you get an A rank, since fully leveling up your character gives you a points bonus at the end of the stage. I honestly think that this is something that Sonic Team should really give it another shot, because it gives purpose to destroying the badniks instead of just using them for points. All in all, to say, I think the gameplay of Sonic Heroes is pretty solid and an enjoyable experience. Like, there's nothing more fun than experiencing the stages for the first time and speeding through them, busting badniks and kicking ass. However, when you're repeating the same stage over and over and over again, you start to realize the flaws in the gameplay. For instance, like I mentioned, the whole differences with the 3 speed types, having speed characters just fucking fly off the map, power characters, if you're not careful, you can just slingshot yourself off the map, and flying characters just being flying characters. And the level design. You will eventually be put off by it, because after your 3rd time going through Frog Forest and seeing the same frog and hearing the character goes, "Oh, that's a frog?" and your 6th time hearing the "I'm falling" doing? You kind of just start to blur it all together and it just becomes a slight little slog. Moving on to the game's presentation, gone are the darker and more muted colors of the adventure series, and now we have a very bright and colorful color palette for this game. I actually really think that the presentation in Sonic Heroes is very great. I akin this to watching a Saturday morning cartoon. I love the idea of Sonic's world being colorful and cartoony. I really wish that Sega eventually in the future nails this like little cartoony style for both the humans and the Sonic characters. I don't think that realistic is the way for Sonic. Sonic 06. That's all I'm gonna say about that. However, there is this weird lighting effect on the world that makes the characters look like they're made out of plastic. It's because of games like this one and Sonic Shuffle that my dream Sonic game is actually an adventure style game with cel-shaded graphics. I would think it would look beautiful. Stages are filled to the brim with these vibrant colors that it just honestly feels like a classic 2D Sonic stage brought into the 3D space, with all the colorful Genesis classic colors in mind. With my favorite stages aesthetically wise being Seaside Hill and Ocean Palace for the beach vibes, the luscious greens of Frog Forest, and the bright and colorful casino stages. Voice acting is very hit or miss for me in this game. A lot of the adventure cast reprise their role for this game and do an excellent job with what they were given. And we even have some newcomers like Team Chaotix's Charmy, Espio, and Vector getting their first ever 3D appearance, and Cream the Rabbit making her first ever mainline game appearance. I think everyone does a good job with their voice delivery. However, there are just some flat lines that just don't hit as well. Sort of like the I'm falling line that plays on every stage where the character is falling, or whenever the cast has to explain what intermechanic here is. I understand that it's not really the voice actor's fault for the repeatable lines, it's more of a part of the game kind of thing, nor is it their fault that when explaining a mechanic they sound like they're reading a book. That's probably what the voice director wanted it to sound like the characters are actually explaining the mechanic to you. But damn, do I wish that they could have tried to make it sound like it's the character telling you this, like add a little bit of pizzazz. Sonic should be a little bit sassy with what he's telling me. Cream should just speak a little bit more politely with me. Big is big, so he should be more big. But the characters really should just sound a little bit more interested in what they are telling me the mechanic is, and not just reading off the line of a script. With some of my favorite lines being when Sonic and Amy first interact with one another, especially since Amy's VA captures just how love-crazed Amy is, and Sonic's VA just captures how fucking, thrown back he is by it, Jesus Christ, Amy, you're fucking crazy. Or how Team Chaotix interacts with one another is always a treat. Listening to them bicker and argue, you can tell that they have been a team for a while and have been through it together. And another personal favorite cutscene of mine in general is when Team Chaotix and Team Rose interact. Vector tries his best to just sound very respectful to Amy. Meanwhile, Amy is just like, it's great. I love that. Speaking of cutscenes, I actually think that the cutscenes in this game are very nicely animated. We no longer have these weirdly animated cutscenes where the characters are motion captured. They did have a little bit of a charm to them in Sonic Adventure 2, however, they were a little bit uncanny. Instead, we have this 100% free animation kind of style that they have going on, which I think is amazing, especially when the game kind of takes the characters and remembers that they are cartoon characters, and they sort of squash and stretch their models to do certain animations. Always a treat whenever I'm playing the game and I'm like, hey, Sonic's hand extended 30,000 feet. It's great. It's amazing. I love it. And since I'm on the topic of cutscenes, let's jump into the story section of this little rant of mine. This story, like the gameplay of Sonic Heroes, is split into 4 teams, each team going on their own journey. To summarize very quickly, Team Sonic's story is the classic stop Eggman from doing Eggman things. Team Dark is all about getting revenge on Eggman and unlocking the secrets behind Shadow's amnesia. Team Rose is all about finding Cream's missing Chow, Chocola, and Big's frog, Froggy. And last but not least, Team Chaotix's story is all about saving their client from the clutches of Eggman. All 4 stories are independent of one another and act according to their own accord. However, there are certain times where one story intersects with another story, leading to a team battle at certain points. As a huge fan of Sonic Adventure 2's story structure, I want to say I'm not a big fan of this. For starters, I don't like how each story kind of happens in their own little sphere and only do like these small little drive-by interactions. Unlike in Sonic Adventure 2, where the two stories are constantly interacting with one another, both directly and indirectly, making it a treat to play the other story so you can see, hey, how did I get to this point in the story, but through their point of view. But that's not to say that the story is all bad. I actually really enjoy the story. I sort of see it as like a weekly episodic Saturday morning cartoon kind of vibe. An interesting thing that they do with each character's story is that sprinkled throughout are glimpses of Metal Sonic doing some fucky-wucky stuff in the background that kind of serves as a narrative thread tying the stories all together, which culminates in the final story. There is one major issue though. The cutscene where it's revealed that Metal Sonic is in the shadows doing the fucky-wucky stuff is kind of played in the exact same stage for every team, making it a narrative nightmare. It is impossible for all 4 teams to be at the exact same location going through the exact same thing at the exact same time. This story setup would have been fine for the classic games or for even the handheld games, but after the last 2 3D Sonic games where they kind of put a little bit more emphasis in the story, it's a bit of a letdown, and it goes back to my previous statement once again where I say it's completely fine on its own, but when you factor in that you have to experience the same thing 4 times over and over and over again, you kind of have this really bad thing of, oh, it's a rerun. Something that again would have been really interesting if they have done in this game is if each team's story took place at different times, having them go through the stage list in a different set of orders, or maybe even have the teams kind of go through their own stages, maybe 1 or 2 team exclusive stages. Something that shows that, hey, in this point A and Sonic's point B, that's when they reach together and then that affects them and blah blah blah. It would have been nice to see how each team's story kind of affects each other and how they all kind of come together to meet at the end of the story. To wrap this video up, I honestly think that Sonic Heroes is an enjoyable game from start to finish. From the gameplay, from the story, from the presentation, it is great. I would even say that it's kind of like playing the 2D classic Sonic games, just in a 3D environment. However, because of the fact that we have to go through the same kind of event over and over and over again, it makes it a slog. It makes it an endurance test. Sonic Team really tried to make a game that would attract a wider audience of both new and old Sonic fans. And while I do think that they succeeded in doing that to a certain degree, the fact that in order to fully complete Sonic Heroes, you have to go through this game 4 times just makes it a game that me, personally, Chris, would never recommend. I would tell someone, hey, play Sonic Hero once, play 1 story or maybe even 2 stories, and that's it. You know, look up the other stuff, look up the final story and see that, you know? I would not recommend somebody playing Sonic Heroes. I just can't. Now, my dear viewer, if you played Sonic Heroes in the past, please tell me your opinion on the game. Did you like the game? Did you dislike it? What's your favorite stage? What's not your favorite stage? Who is your favorite team? What's your favorite song? You know, I would love to hear you guys just talk about that in the comment. You guys did that in my Sonic Adventure 2 video. It was a blast to just read everybody's comments and all that stuff. I always do my best to reply to everyone. Thank you once again for watching my video. Thank you once again for just listening to me ramble to this very end. And I would love to see you guys next time when I discuss why Shadow the Hedgehog is actually one of the most ambitious Sonic games ever. See you guys next time. Bye, guys.